Hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I am Jenna Fullenkamp with GuidePoint Security. Today I have the true pleasure of talking with Kirk Herath, Cybersecurity Strategic Advisor, Office of the Governor, State of Ohio. Hi, Kirk.
Hi, Jenna. It's nice to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. So throughout this conversation and even throughout your career, you have this beautiful ebb and flow of technology and legal. But with your strong legal background, how do you think that unique education path impacts your approach to cybersecurity specifically?
They don't really teach in law school, which is, you are an attorney. When you come out, you're an attorney and counselor of law, right? So you are an attorney. You aren't really a counselor of law until you have a lot of experience. And by that, it really just means you're an advisor. You're a senior advisor to people. That requires building collaborative relationships. This stuff is all kind of in the gray, particularly when it comes to cybersecurity. It's around tolerances. It's around reasonable risk. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's around risk. My practice of law, which I think doesn't always align with a lot of lawyers. A lot of lawyers have the bad rap of being, the office of no, right? Well, that's really easy. I can just, Jenna comes to me and says, I want to do something. And I go, oh, no, there's risk there. Well, you know what? There may be more risk in not doing something than in doing it. So over the years, my experience taught me that, I was a problem solver and also a risk manager and a risk advisor to business leaders, technology leaders. And I would listen to them and we would talk about, and we lay out the options, we lay out the risks associated with each. We'd also balance it against the opportunities of whatever it is they wanted to do, right? So you can come up with fanciful risks around a lot of stuff. I have found that very few of those are ever realistic. And if your tolerance is zero, then you're probably not going to be very successful. And my tolerance wasn't zero; it was something a lot more than that. And again, it's all about transparency too, right? Make sure that when you're making these decisions, that everybody kind of understands again what the risks are and what the opportunities are, and that you didn't make it in a vacuum. And if something does go wrong down the line, right? Okay, well, you deal with that problem when it arrives, and don't presume it's going to happen, because my experience is that it almost never does happen, and you worry about things that are generally controllable. So.
Well, moving on, this might feel a bit of a softball question because it's relatively short and to the point, but I think it's kind of one of the hardest for today. What do you believe is the most critical foundation of a security posture?
Identity management, bar none. You have to have a good authentication and identity access management, and it's got to be granular enough around roles and what you can what you can and can't access. But your identity management is, to me, that's where you start. Now, a lot of the frameworks say you should start. Certainly, you should understand your the inventory of your assets and have a data inventory and all that, and that is important. And theoretically, back to the theoretical versus the practical. Many organizations, let's just say, maybe most organizations, have difficulty doing complete and up-to-date inventories of their data and where it sits and on what assets, and so then default to what? Identity management, right? Okay, so we don't know where the most important data is, and we don't always know maybe the four corners of all of our entire network. But we do know how to access our network, and we at least can make sure that the right people are accessing the right things at the right time. So that's sort of been my, if I have a bias, I generally start around and I focus, as I am right now. Ohio has a really good, we have our own identity management service called Ohio ID, and it's very good. And that one of those capabilities I referred to at the beginning of our discussion here. It's one of those things you'd have. We would have had to have built it if it didn't exist. Well, it existed. And again, it existed because the lieutenant governor and the governor invested in innovative ideas as soon as they entered in their first administration, and the Innovate Ohio program created it. So it's now sort of baked into the cake, and it is evolving. And but yeah, authentication, access management, definitely. And in my old job at Nationwide, it's one thing that we, as a large organization, that really was a holding company of a lot of companies we had bought over the decades and decades. It was an amalgam, and we had a very complex network. And identity access management was always something that I used to say it was the longest, most evolving project I ever was on. I think literally it never ended, right? Because it's the risk is always evolving, the technology is always evolving. So your identity and access management system has to evolve with it. And so it wasn't that we didn't have good access management. We had good access management because we had the discipline and maturity to continue to stay on top of it and evolve it along with everything else. So
fantastic answer. I know many people watching this are saying, yes, that's it. That is it.
It's hard. It is hard. It's a hard, and it's usually, there's multiple identity management systems, and and frankly, sometimes you need them, like until you can migrate off of old platforms onto more universal uniform platforms. You're going to have the kind of the layers of identity management, but you should ultimately have a strategy that leads you to a single source of the truth.
And to your point, it is hard, and in that you spoke to the changing environment.
Right.
Overarching, to someone who's newer in the cybersecurity industry, I'm sure they can at times feel overwhelmed. What advice would you give them about creating a strategy and direction in their role as they get started?
Well, I think you go back to what we just talked about, right? You've got to get a baseline for what your network looks like, and the maturity of the capabilities that are part of it and that are being used to protect it and manage it and whatnot. And then a little bit of what I said in response to your answer about my legal role, right? Then you just got to meet a lot of people. You got to figure out like who's running all this stuff, because you'll never be able to do it by yourself, and you're going to need to identify all of the different leaders and the people that work for them who are going to be most helpful to you as you protect this thing we call a network.
Hmm.
And the different applications on top of it, and you're going to have different businesses or different missions around different businesses. Some businesses are going to have different tolerances for risk than others. Some are going to be on better technology than others. So you really just you have to spend some time just again getting to know the four corners of your problem set, which is generally people, processes, and technology. You got to get to know all those things, and then you got to find allies who can help you do the job, because if you're just out there on an island, you'll ultimately perish, because this is a team sport, and you're going to need a team to help you.
Well, Kirk, you answered each of my questions so eloquently. It was truly a pleasure. I appreciate you taking time to join me today.
Well, I'm very happy to have had the opportunity, Jenna, and I hope someday we can do this again.
Thank you. As a reminder, please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews. We'll see you soon.